The phone is face down, but your body is still looking at it. Not your eyes, your body. There is a difference, and if you have lived through this kind of silence, you know exactly what I mean. Your hand reaches for the screen before you even decide to. Your chest tightens at the sound of a notification that is not his. You tell yourself you are fine, you are busy, you have moved on, and yet some hidden part of you is still standing in the doorway of that old conversation, listening for footsteps that may never come. What makes silence so painful is not only that nothing is being said, it is that your nervous system keeps treating the absence like a message. A closed door becomes a signal, a delayed reply becomes a verdict, a blank screen becomes a story, and somewhere inside that story, your body begins to behave as if it is responsible for keeping the connection alive. That is the part no one sees. People think the pain is about the other person not writing back. But the deeper pain is the state your body enters when you do not know where you stand. The mind can tolerate uncertainty for a while. The nervous system often cannot. It starts scanning, it starts predicting, it starts replaying old scenes, old conversations, old tones of voice, as if somewhere in that repetition it might find control. And that is where the real trap begins. Because silence does not only create distance, it activates memory. It wakes up every old place in you that once had to wait. Every moment you were left guessing. Every time love felt conditional. Every time attention came and went like weather. Every time you learned that being calm was safer than asking for too much. Every time you made yourself smaller so someone else would stay comfortable. So when their silence starts controlling your nervous system, it is rarely because this one person is uniquely powerful. It is because they touched a wound that was already waiting for language. This is where Carl Jung becomes important, because Jung understood something that modern people often miss. What grips us most strongly is not always the person in front of us, but the inner image they have awakened. The psyche does not simply react to facts. It reacts to meaning. It reacts to projection. It reacts to the old emotional charge that gets attached to a new face. You may think you are waiting for a text, but your body may be waiting for relief. You may think you are missing them, but your nervous system may be missing the brief sense of being chosen, seen, or temporarily safe. And once you see that, the whole dynamic changes. Not instantly, not magically, but honestly. Because then you can begin to separate what is happening now from what is being relived inside you. There is a kind of silence that is ordinary. Busy people, distracted people, tired people, emotionally immature people, all go quiet sometimes. That is reality. But there is another kind of silence that feels loaded. It has weight. It carries tension. It makes you feel as if you are standing outside a room where something important is happening, and you are not sure whether you are invited in or being kept out on purpose. That kind of silence can hook the nervous system hard, especially if you are someone who notices everything, especially if you are someone who can feel a shift before anyone says a word, especially if you learned early that reading the atmosphere was safer than asking direct questions. People like that often become experts at emotional weather. They can tell when a room has changed. They can tell when a message has become colder. They can tell when a relationship has started to tilt. But being able to sense something is not the same as being able to control it. And that distinction matters, because many sensitive people confuse hypervigilance with intuition. They are not the same. Intuition is quiet. Hypervigilance is tense. Intuition does not make you abandon yourself. Hypervigilance makes you monitor everything except your own pain. So you sit there, trying to decode the silence. Was that last message too much? Did you sound needy? Did you say the wrong thing? Should you wait longer? Should you act casual? Should you disappear a little so they feel your absence? Should you send one more message, just simple and light, so you do not seem dramatic? And in that mental spiral, the nervous system is no longer responding to the moment. It is trying to manage abandonment before it fully arrives. That is why silence can feel addictive. Not because it is loving, because it is unresolved. The mind hates unresolved tension. It would rather build a fantasy than sit in an open question. So it starts inventing motives. It starts reading energy. It starts turning every delay into a clue. And if the person has ever been inconsistent before, the psyche becomes even more determined to solve them. That is where projection enters the room. Projection is one of those Jungian ideas that sounds abstract until you feel it in your own life. It simply means that we often place parts of our inner world onto another person, and then react to the image we have placed there as if it were the whole truth. You may not only be seeing them, you may be seeing your hope, your fear, your longing, your unfinished grief, your wish to finally be important to someone who seems just out of reach. Sometimes the person you cannot stop thinking about is carrying more of your inner life than they are carrying of themselves. That does not mean your feelings are fake. It means your feelings are speaking in layers, and if you only look at the surface layer, you will stay trapped. Because the surface says, they are silent. But the deeper layer asks, why does this silence reach so far into me? That question is uncomfortable, but it is the one that sets you free. There is often a complex underneath this kind of reaction. Jung used the word complex to describe an emotionally charged cluster of memories, beliefs, and reactions that can seize the psyche like a living knot. A complex is not just a thought, it is a pattern with emotional voltage. It can pull you into old roles without asking permission. For one person, silence activates the abandonment complex. For another, it activates the rescue complex. For another, it activates the shame complex. For another, it activates the part that believes love must be earned through patience, endurance, and emotional labor. And if you grew up learning that love was something you had to maintain by staying alert, then silence does not feel neutral. It feels dangerous. It feels like a test. It feels like the beginning of loss. So your body starts doing what it has always done. It tries to fix the atmosphere. It tries to anticipate the need before it is spoken. It tries to earn back what feels threatened. And if the other person is emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, manipulative, or simply not capable of meeting you with clarity, your effort often increases the pain instead of easing it. That is one of the cruelest things about this pattern. The more your nervous system panics, the more you may reach. The more you reach, the more you may feel exposed. The more exposed you feel, the more you may doubt yourself. And the more you doubt yourself, the more their silence seems to have authority over your inner state. But silence does not have authority unless something inside you gives it that power. That is not blame. That is the place where freedom begins. Because if a pattern can be activated, it can also be recognized. And what is recognized begins to lose its spell. You may have thought you were waiting for them to soften, to realize, to return, to explain, to finally say the thing that would make everything make sense. But often the deeper work is not about getting an explanation from the outside. It is about noticing the inner collapse that happens when another person becomes the regulator of your mood. That is the moment the psyche hands over its center. It is subtle. No dramatic sound, no visible chain, just a quiet surrender. You stop checking in with yourself and start checking the phone. You stop asking, "What do I feel?" and begin asking, "What do they mean?" You stop noticing your own fatigue and start studying their behavior like it contains your survival. And this is where the persona can become part of the trap. The persona is the social face, the role we learn to wear in order to belong. Sometimes the persona of the empath is the good listener, the understanding one, the calm one, the one who does not make things difficult. Sometimes it is the one who can hold everything together, the one who can sense what others need, the one who keeps the peace. The one who absorbs tension so no one else has to feel it. That persona can be admired by everyone around you, and still it can cost you your life force. Because when your identity is built around being the one who can endure more than others, silence becomes a stage where that role is tested. You begin to believe that if you stay patient enough, kind enough, available enough, the connection will finally become safe. But what if the connection is not asking you to be more patient? What if it is asking you to notice that patience has become self-erasure? This is not about becoming cold. It is not about punishing anyone. It is not about turning your heart into stone. It is about seeing where your kindness has been recruited against you. A boundary is not cruelty. A boundary is the place where your psyche says, "I will no longer treat my own distress as less important than someone else's comfort." That sentence can feel shocking the first time you truly mean it. Because if you have been the emotionally responsible one for a long time, boundaries can feel like guilt. Silence from them can feel like your fault. Pulling back can feel rude. Not chasing can feel unnatural. And if the other person has been used to your availability, your pause may even make you feel like you were doing something wrong. But guilt is not always a sign that you are wrong. Sometimes guilt is the sound of an old role losing power. Sometimes guilt is what happens when the persona starts to crack and the self begins to ask for a more honest life. The self, in Jungian terms, is the deeper organizing center of the psyche. It is bigger than the role you play, bigger than the image you maintain, bigger than the fear that keeps you compliant. The self does not always speak loudly. Often it speaks through discomfort, through exhaustion, through a strange refusal to keep pretending. Through the body saying, "I cannot keep doing this." If you have felt that lately, listen carefully. The body often knows before the mind accepts it. You may be tired in a way that sleep does not fix. You may feel a low-grade dread every time the phone is quiet. You may find yourself checking messages even when you promised you would not. You may feel embarrassed by how much power one person's absence seems to have over your mood. Do not shame yourself for that. Shame only deepens the loop. Instead, notice the mechanics. Notice how the silence arrives and immediately starts recruiting your imagination. Notice how your mind fills in blanks with worst-case scenarios. Notice how quickly you turn inward and ask what you did wrong. Notice how the body tightens, as if it is bracing for a blow that may never come. That body response is not irrational, it is learned, and learned responses can be unlearned, not by forcing calm, not by pretending not to care, but by slowly teaching your system that silence is not always danger, and that your worth does not rise and fall with another person's response time. There is a moment many people reach where they finally understand that they are not only reacting to the other person, they are reacting to the version of themselves that was formed in the waiting. That version of you may have become highly skilled at interpreting crumbs. It may have become fluent in ambiguity. It may have learned to call inconsistency a challenge, emotional distance a mystery, and withheld affection a sign of depth. That is how the psyche can romanticize what it cannot yet release. Because if you do not want to feel the grief, you may turn the pattern into a story. And stories can be seductive. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they are scared. Maybe they are not used to being vulnerable. Maybe they care but do not know how to show it. Maybe they are protecting themselves. Sometimes that may even be partly true. But the more important question is not whether their reason is understandable. The question is whether your nervous system is becoming smaller inside the explanation. Because you can understand someone and still step back. You can have compassion and still refuse the loop. You can see their fear and still honor your own dignity. This is where Jungian shadow work becomes practical, not abstract. The shadow is not only the dark side of the other person, it is also the part of you that the situation has forced into view. The part that hates waiting, the part that resents being invisible, the part that wants certainty now, the part that is tired of being the emotionally generous one, the part that feels ashamed for wanting more, the part that is angry that love has become a place of vigilance. Many sensitive people try to keep that shadow hidden because it does not match the image they have of themselves. I'm not needy. I'm not controlling. I'm not bitter. I'm not the type to demand reassurance. But the shadow is not created by wanting too much. It is often created by wanting something very human and being taught to feel bad for it. So, the shadow comes out sideways. It becomes overthinking. It becomes checking. It becomes interpreting every small shift. It becomes emotional self-surveillance. It becomes the inability to rest, because some part of you believes rest is how you lose people. And here is the deeper truth. When silence controls your nervous system, it is often because your system believes that staying alert is the price of staying connected. That belief may have once protected you. It may have helped you survive a family, a relationship, or an environment where emotional unpredictability was normal. But what protected you then may be imprisoning you now. That is why healing does not always feel like peace at first. Sometimes it feels like grief. Sometimes it feels like anger. Sometimes it feels like the terrifying emptiness that comes when you stop chasing and suddenly have to hear your own inner life again. That emptiness is not a failure. It is a threshold. And yes, this is the part most people avoid. Because once you stop feeding the outer drama, you are left with the inner one. The one that says, "Who am I when I am not being chosen, pursued, or reassured?" That question can feel like standing in a quiet room after a storm. The air is still, but everything inside you is shaking. Let yourself feel that. Do not rush to fill it. Do not immediately replace the person with another distraction, another fantasy, another explanation. Sit with the fact that your body has been living under a kind of emotional command, and then ask a better question. Not, how do I make them respond? But, what in me believes their silence has the right to govern my state? That question opens the door to individuation. Individuation is Jung's word for the process of becoming more whole, more yourself, less split between the roles you were given and the truth that is trying to emerge. It is not about perfection. It is about alignment. It is about no longer letting unconscious patterns run your life from the basement. And when it comes to silence, individuation often begins with a simple but difficult act. Not reaching for the first impulse, not sending the message immediately, not checking again, not making their absence the center of your afternoon, not reorganizing your entire emotional world around a person who has not met you in clarity. That does not mean you become indifferent. It means you stop treating your own nervous system like an afterthought. The first time you do this, it may feel unbearable. You may feel the urge to explain, to soften, to repair, to make yourself available just in case they are testing you. You may feel the old fear that if you do not keep the thread alive, it will be cut forever. But ask yourself something honest. If a thread can only survive through your constant anxiety, was it ever a safe thread? If connection requires you to abandon your own center, what exactly are you preserving? This is not an argument for pride. It is an invitation to reality. A healthy connection does not require you to become smaller in order to keep it breathing. A healthy connection does not ask your body to live in a state of emergency. A healthy connection does not make silence feel like a punishment and attention feel like a reward. What you are learning, slowly, is how to stop confusing activation with intimacy. Because sometimes what feels like a deep bond is really a deeply activated wound. That does not make the feeling meaningless. It makes it intelligible. And when something becomes intelligible, you can work with it. You can begin to notice the moment your body starts to spiral and say, "This is old." You can begin to notice the urge to chase and say, "This is fear, not destiny." You can begin to notice the fantasy that if you just wait long enough, the silence will transform into devotion and say, "I do not need to disappear to be loved." That sentence matters. I do not need to disappear to be loved. Say it softly if you need to, because many people who are magnetized by silence learned, somewhere early, that love was something they had to earn by becoming easy to handle. They learned to be low maintenance, agreeable, patient, forgiving. They learned that asking for clarity could cost them connection. They learned that emotional needs were dangerous if expressed too directly. So they adapted. And adaptation can look like maturity. Until one day it starts to feel like self-betrayal. The body knows the difference. It knows when you are being dignified and when you are being dutiful at your own expense. It knows when you are choosing peace and when you are swallowing pain to keep the bond from collapsing. And sometimes the first real act of self-respect is not a speech. It is a quiet withdrawal of your nervous system from the role of emotional caretaker. You stop making their silence your job. You stop interpreting every pause as a problem to solve. You stop treating your own longing as a command. You let the screen stay dark for a while. You let the unanswered message remain unanswered. You let the discomfort rise without immediately obeying it. This is where the body begins to learn something new, not through theory, through experience. That you can survive a quiet night, that you can survive not knowing, that you can survive the absence of a reply without collapsing into the idea that you are unworthy, unlovable, or forgotten. And once the body learns that, the silence starts losing its power. Not because the other person suddenly becomes better, but because you are no longer letting their absence write the story of your worth. There is a strange grief in that realization, because part of you may have hoped that their silence meant they were secretly overwhelmed by feeling, secretly longing, secretly unable to act because of how much you matter. And maybe sometimes that fantasy is easier to hold than the truth. The truth may be simpler. They may be avoidant. They may be conflicted. They may be emotionally limited. They may be attached to the power of ambiguity. They may enjoy the attention without offering clarity. They may not know how to meet you in the depth you offer. Or they may know and still choose not to. Any of those possibilities can hurt, but none of them should become a prison. This is the turning point. Not when you finally decode them perfectly. When you stop needing their silence to mean something about your value. Because once you do that, the whole structure starts to shift. The silence is no longer a command. It becomes information. It is no longer a verdict. It becomes a boundary. It is no longer a force controlling your body. It becomes a signal showing you where your old wound still lives. And that is useful. Pain becomes useful when it stops being an altar and becomes a mirror. If this names something you have never been able to say out loud, write a single sentence for yourself in the comments or on a piece of paper tonight. Just one sentence. Something honest. Something that returns you to yourself. Not a performance, not a promise, just the truth. Maybe your sentence is, I am tired of being regulated by uncertainty. Maybe it is, I no longer want to confuse anxiety with love. Maybe it is, my body deserves peace more than my fear deserves attention. Maybe it is, I can care without chasing. Maybe it is, their silence is not my identity. A sentence like that may seem small, but psychologically, it is a line being drawn inside the psyche. And the psyche recognizes lines. It recognizes when the old pattern is no longer being fed. It recognizes when the persona of endless patience is being replaced by something quieter and stronger. It recognizes when the shadow is no longer being denied, but listened to. The shadow may say, I am angry. It may say, I am hurt. It may say, I am done pretending this does not cost me. Do not silence that voice too quickly. Anger, when it is clean, can be a form of truth. It tells you where your boundary is. It tells you where your energy has been taken for granted. It tells you where your heart has been overextended. And if you can hear that anger without becoming it, you begin to recover your center. That is what emotional maturity looks like here. Not numbness, not revenge, not dramatic endings, just the quiet return of your own inner authority. You begin to notice that the urge to check the phone has less to do with the phone and more to do with the parts of you that still believe waiting is love. You begin to notice that the silence is not only outside you, it is also the silence that exists when you have not yet learned how to speak your own needs without apology. You begin to notice that some of your pain is not coming from this one person at all. It is coming from every time you had to shrink your needs to keep a bond from breaking. And that is a grief worth honoring, because it means you are not just healing a relationship pattern, you are healing a way of existing. Slowly, the body starts to understand that not every quiet moment is abandonment. Sometimes it is just quiet. Sometimes it is your chance to breathe. Sometimes it is the space where your own life can return. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop translating every pause into a threat. And sometimes the most sacred thing you can do is let someone's silence reveal their capacity without making it the measure of your value. That is the difference between being available and being available to yourself. One keeps you on a leash, the other brings you home. So the next time the screen stays empty, notice what happens in your body before you notice what happens in your mind. Notice the tightening, notice the urge, notice the old script trying to start. Then pause, put the phone down, unclench your jaw, feel your feet, take one slow breath that belongs only to you, and ask, quietly, what am I actually afraid of right now? Not, what are they feeling? Not, why are they doing this? What am I afraid of right now? That question can open the whole room, because often what you fear is not just losing them, It is being forced to feel the old wound without the fantasy that keeps it soft. It is being left alone with the part of you that still believes love must be chased. It is being asked to trust yourself more than you trust the silence. That is hard. But it is also where your dignity begins. You do not heal by making silence disappear. You heal by becoming someone who no longer collapses inside it. And that is a very different kind of power. Not the power to control the other person. The power to remain with yourself. The power to let the unanswered message stay unanswered without turning it into a collapse. The power to understand that your nervous system is not broken. It is loyal to old patterns that once helped you survive. The power to thank those patterns for what they did, and then gently outgrow them. The power to say, I see what this is awakening in me. The power to stop feeding what feeds on your attention. The power to choose peace over pursuit. The power to let a person's silence be their silence, while your life remains yours. And if they ever do come back, they will not be returning to the version of you that was waiting in the dark, trying to earn a reply by becoming smaller. They will meet a woman or a man who no longer abandons themselves just to keep a connection alive. They will meet a person whose body has learned a new lesson. That silence is not a master. It is only a sound. Your nervous system does not have to bow to it anymore. And if they never come back, that truth still stands. You come back. You return to yourself. You return to the chair, the room, the breath, the steady hand, the quiet mirror, the life that was waiting for you the whole time. Not as someone who stopped caring, as someone who finally stopped disappearing.